I'm now going to introduce our first keynote speaker of the day, Mike Bracken, who is the Executive Director of Digital for the UK government. But he's no ordinary government official. He's also helped keep public authorities to account from the outside, first through news media, where he led The Guardian's leap into full digital transformation, and then as co-founder of My Society, which helped redefine the relationship British citizens had with their government. He is a developer, a devolver, not a centralizer. Let the people lead is one of his mantras, and we're now going to hear how Mike wants to put it himself. Thank you very much, Mike Bracken. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Stephen. Can you hear me okay? Yeah. Thank you, Stephen, Isabel, for the introduction and welcome here today. Thank you, Commissioner, for those words. Particularly great to hear that we want to get digital leaders at the heart of government, because in my last 3 or 4 years around an odyssey around the UK government, it's been very interesting, not least to see the absence of people with digital skills at the heart of government. Thank you for the introduction. I'm nobody's idea of a developer, so please don't quote me on that. But I am going to talk about some developers now. For some of those who know a little bit about what we've done in the UK, then I apologise. I'm going to give everybody sort of 5 or 10 minutes on our story, and then talk a little bit about the wider topics that the Commissioner has touched on. So I will try and be clear, and I'll try and be quick. So I'm from the Government Digital Service in the UK. This is what a government department looks like, especially when there is cake. For the last 3 years, 4 years now, we have been transforming government. We should not be shy about that aspiration. Our job is not to fix the computers. Our job is to transform public services. And when you look from the outside, that looks just like making services for users. These are some of the services that we started. We started for gov.uk, which is a single domain for the entire British government, for the UK government. And it's the best place to find government services and information in the UK. We have it's now 10 million users a week. We have over 300 departments and agencies on that domain, and we saved £60 million a year every year simply by doing it this way. More importantly than that, every time you deal with the government, nearly every time in the UK, it looks like the government. We are speaking with one voice digitally. This is a huge change in how we were set up. There's many things to talk about in GovUK, but in the audience here today, and you're focusing on this organisation, 35,000 people in the Commission, I want to talk about things that people don't often talk about. Because when we built GovUK, we had to do an awful lot of work to support the services and infrastructure. We have to do things like this. Publishing, of course, search, identity, metrics, all of these things. I would argue that these things and more are actually at the bedrock of a set of skills that government need to have, and they need to have them at a very good level and central to the operation of any government. These are no longer things we can just go and procure when we want them and drop them in. We need to have a deep knowledge and a deep understanding of infrastructure and services of this type. From the outside, this stuff's invisible, but you have to get that stuff right to be able to transform departments and work with government services. Once we have a platform for gov.uk, which is our information to everybody in the UK, we then look for our transactions. Pretty much all governments do the same stuff. We have 762 transactions in the UK government. You can name the top 50, passports, driving licence, all that stuff. All governments do the same. So we started to take 25 of that top 50 and transform them and make them digital by default. Really difficult but important public services, like an allowance for carers, or more importantly in a democracy, registering to vote. We put 2 to 3 million people onto the electoral register within 3 months. Making a lasting power of attorney. the ability to transfer assets between a family and with the state. These are deeply complicated transactions. They are vital for the working of a democracy and a government, and they are now digital by default. Data. We made sure everybody can get the data they need to improve services too. This, sadly, is a screenshot, but our data is open. gov.uk/performance will show you that we publish all the data. If somebody in the audience with a browser wants to check how many people are buying a car tax license now, or applying for a benefit, or many others of these services, or indeed are using gov.uk, you can have a look right now. The idea that government should hold data within and publish it in a report is crazy. We should just publish it natively in real time. And we use that same data to drive our activity whilst inside government. There is no internal and external data set, there is just data. To do all this, we have to move much stuff around in government, and the biggest thing we have to do is talk about our approach to technology. We've brought in an amazing amount of reform, of controls, standards. Standards are hugely important, advice and guidance, which means that we can give people the tools that they need to do their job, and they give them some choice. It's not about prescribing a certain technology, it's about prescribing a standard, an open standard, that everybody works towards, so you can have the device you want at the time you want it. So the point is this: if you're building a digital government, you're not just building websites. Indeed, you're not building websites at all. You should be considering your API first and foremost. But when we're building digital governments, the web service is just simply the window through which users look at how government works. Digital transformation properly at government level means working right across the technology stack, but right across the government. Don't go to the IT box anymore. It means transforming the very way government operates. And at the heart of that transformation and at the heart of that culture change is a relentless focus on delivery. Because it is this focus on delivery, focusing on what users want and using data to give them that, that actually changes government. We found that we're not going to change government by asking government to change. We're not going to change government by writing policy papers. We are going to change government by delivering digital services. Here's an example. Instead of thinking about how we might change our office IT and writing procurement documents for 2 years, we just ran a trial to give people devices like this one, or indeed whichever one they want. We took about 60% of the cost out of our technology, but crucially we gave people skills and tools to use a new variant of technology and gave them some choice about what they want to use. That immediately became expanded to other colleagues in departments. So rather than boil the ocean, we started with a small number of colleagues, gave them great technology, word spreads quickly, everybody wants some. Here's another example. We've changed how government buys technology and digital service, making the supply chain much more diverse. I would contend that governments, like many large organisations, have one of the most profound problems, and it is the word procurement. If you procure, you buy once. If you buy once, in an era where technology and digital services are moving so quickly, you guarantee obsolescence very quickly. What we have to do is think about commissioning, renting services, having commercial agreements with our suppliers and our contractors that lets us change very, very quickly. To do that, we have to think more about commissioning, and we have to have open standards. We have to constantly buy stuff that works on the same standards. We've created a digital marketplace in the UK that allows people in government, all manner of government, central, local, wherever, to start commissioning technology to build digital services. The problem we have had in the past, and I suspect many governments has, is technology has equaled a digital service. They are not the same. Technology is a fourth order question. The first order question is, what's the public service? Second order is, what does the user want? The third order is, where's the data? And the fourth is, now maybe we need some technology to help us. But we've been thinking about technology first. It's not the way to think about public services. The effects of moving to this in our world have been quite radical and quite interesting. You all know the shape of our country, I hope. That's London in the bottom right, if you don't. But before we moved to this, 80% plus of our technology buying was coming from a handful of places. That's crazy. So here's another example about setting standards and about educating our colleagues and working with them. We set a standard, a digital by default service standard. It's 26 points. And if any new or redesigned public service, and indeed now we've just made an announcement that any internal service must go through that standard, which raises the bar for everybody around government. But crucially, it takes away the subjectivity. My system is better than your system. This system here should be used over this system there. Who cares about that? It's about making sure everything works to a standard. And we set that standard so that services must pass, but also we provide huge amounts of support to our colleagues who are trying to meet that standard. The nature of that support is interesting. Our old world used to be, let's have a meeting and a bureaucracy and a committee, and it would take months to make a decision. Now it's on a browser and it's a manual. And if you want to know anything about digital or technology or how to meet a service standard, you can go to the URL, you can read all about it, but also you can participate. If you're in government, you can say, well, this works for me over here, this is not working so good, let's look at developing a standard. So by being in government, by being in a digital government, one is not only using digital services, but contributing to a community that is developing standards. It is this way of doing it, having everybody do it from the bottom up, rather than having top-down, procurement-led directives, which is radically changing how government works. It challenges hierarchies, but it's much more important because it brings everybody together. We're able to do all of this stuff because of our principles, because our teams work in common ways. Firstly, we have a default position of being open. There are some things in government that government shouldn't be open about. I'm aware of that. I've worked at the senior end of the British government. However, our default to being closed is, in some places, ridiculous. The vast majority of information I ever receive should just be published and open. Because when we're open, great things happen. Things become simpler and we start a conversation. That takes an act of leadership. I constantly go to meetings and ask people to be open, and I just ask them, if we don't, who will die? Very few people have died, I don't think yet, since we started publishing documents about our technology standards. But this culture of openness is something that must come from within. We need to be agile, and I don't just mean agile as a software methodology, although I would recommend that. We need to be agile in our activity, to be quick, to be reactive. The biggest problem I've seen in governments is that our agility, or our lack of agility, is based on our perception that our customers are internal. I get paid by the public. It is to those people whom we provide services. Our agility means it is no good anymore to launch a big service that's taken years to develop, that nobody really likes to use, and then just leave it there and then say, well, we did that, tick box, move on. We must constantly be talking to users and meet user needs. Crucially, we must have multidisciplinary teams. When we brought people together at the Government Digital Service, we have people from all walks of backgrounds, developers, of course, designers specifically, anthropologists, user researchers, old guys like me, civil servants who've been here for 30 years. mix them all up, put them all together and work in multidisciplinary teams. The idea that we can have a policy team doing the thinking over here, and then the delivery team doing the doing over here, that's just a ridiculous way of working. Absolutely ridiculous, and nobody benefits. Neither of those two teams wins. The thing that should unite us when we work in government is our relentless focus on user needs. Many of you, all of you I suspect here who work in government know that at times it is a thankless task. I've worked in 5 industries. Very few people come up to me and say, "Great, what the government did today is brilliant." It doesn't happen very often. But it is nice to hear people say, "Oh, I used this transaction, it was really easy, and I used this service and I found this information, and my government reconnected with me." Because in a digital age, that reconnection, that bond between the user and the government is democracy. That is how the government works. These aren't new ways of working. What we're doing at the Government Digital Service and in the UK government is not new. This has been done many, many times before in different industries. Most industries have either adapted or failed to adapt. We're only just waking up to this because our monopoly position in the government is going away. I don't mean we're going to go away as a government, but if we don't react to this, our position is disintermediated and people will lose the connection with their government. And when people lose the connection with the government, that's not a healthy position for our society to be in. We're not alone in this. I've come today to talk a little about the UK, but it is heartening for me to see that this reconnection via digital services is happening in a different flavour and a different shape, but all around the world. Prime Minister Ansip, when I was over in Estonia, probably one of the leading countries in the world, probably by necessity. The tone and flavour, the style of digital engagement and digital services was, I suspect, because of the circumstances of the country. The US, an opposite example. For a long, long time they had the same approaches that we did in the UK. Then healthcare.gov happened. Now we have 18F modelled on the government digital service. They also are being open. They're publishing a digital services playbook. Again, publishing the rules, setting the standards, giving people the tools to help them within government. It's a very different model than going out and procuring services. It's not just about what governments are doing, however, from the inside. It's about what people are doing from the outside to government. This guy is Santiago Siri, a guy in Buenos Aires who was so unhappy with his government, he started a political party based on the principles of the internet to engage with it. This is his partner, Pia Mancini. She went one step further. She's so fed up with government, she created an operating system for it called Government Democracy OS. This is Hernan Moreno. This guy realized when in Latin America, when the countries were coming together about 5 years ago, he got every president to sign a white book to make all the data services interoperable. I'm picking a different continent here because these are people we don't often see in Europe. But all around the world, this is happening, and it's happening from within, and it's happening from without. We're all working on digital transformation, and we all have a different flavour, and that's okay. It's the principles that underpin that flavour, being open, being agile, being focused on users, receptive to users. That's the key. Because there's a common approach in all of these. And that common approach is all about meeting user needs by building things. This is the hard one, right? This is the really tough one. Government's not here to build things anymore, right? Because we're a bit too clever for that. We've moved on, right? We don't, that's done by like people who build stuff. It's not us. I'm afraid that's the tough news. We've got to get really, really good at this again. Because building government in this day and age means building government services. Because these people I've just shown you and others have recognized the same thing. Sadly, government doesn't get transformed by policy making. Governments need policies, of course. But the act and art of policy making does not transform how governments work. Instead, it embeds working practices within governments. Government gets transformed by delivering stuff, by learning about the messy realities of delivering digital services to users with an increasingly high level of user demand. Government will not be transformed by developing policy toolkits. Sorry to say that. I've never seen a government transformed by one yet. It's a nice comfort blanket. We got a toolkit. Great. We won't change one little bit with the toolkit. We will change if we have digital services, and through them we are having a conversation with our users. So, there's a simple three-stage process that we followed by necessity. Number one, deliver great digital services. Get better at them, keep iterating them, keep changing them. Number two, share them with each other. To share them, they have to be open, they have to be interoperable. As government officials, we really, really must work hard on interoperability. And then, just keep going and make a lot of them. Finally, my one piece of advice, and the one thing that I hold dearly, because I spent much time in my first couple of years in government listening to people who came into my office to tell me what a great thing they were going to do, and they had some PowerPoint slides to show me, or some keynote slides, and they had a big procurement, and in about 3 or 4 years, it was going to be brilliant. Everything was just going to be brilliant. And I said, okay, well, you're going to spend a lot of money, public money, I just want to see it. Show me the thing. Because in this day and age, if you can develop software so quickly, much more quickly than the cost and the time to have the meeting to discuss developing it. So everybody should be saying, back in my office in a week, show me a prototype. If we can't do that, if we can't work that quickly, then we're not doing our job on behalf of our users. I hope that's given you a view of what we're doing in the UK. This is all born by necessity, but I think we've stumbled on our version of the same thing that's happening around the world. If you'd like to read more, and I hope you will, everything is in the open. I hope this presentation will be made accessible to you, and certainly these links are all in public. There's nothing to hide, it's all there. Thanks very much.